Hello and welcome to Court Corner. I am Ashmit Kumar. As someone who has been a part of judgments that paved the way for a Ram temple at the disputed site in Ayodhya, upheld privacy as a fundamental right and decriminalized unnatural sex, Justice DY Chandrachud's 8-year stint at the Supreme Court has undoubtedly been an impactful one. During his last 2 years as the Chief Justice, the longest tenure in the last 12 years, Justice Chandrachud sat on benches that passed a number of landmark judgments. These include terming the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional, refusal to give legal sanctity to same-sex marriages instead of leaving it to the Parliament's discretion. Over the next half an hour, we will be discussing the tenure of CJI, Justice Chandrachud, and decode what his legacy would be. But before that, we bring to you visuals of an emotional last working day for Chief Justice DY Chandrachud, who retires on the 10th of November. Justice Chandrachud got emotional and could be seen wiping tears as Justice Narasimha nailed his extraordinary ability as a lawyer.
I had the great opportunity of appearing before him and also sitting with him.
Yes, well, that's...
I must say that at both instances I failed to come up to, as a lawyer, extraordinary ability, as a judge, extraordinary ability, as we were all appearing from the bar, and his patience, his participation in the proceedings, whoever appears, it was amazing.
You ask me, what keeps me going? It's this court which has kept me going. Because there's not a single day when you feel that you have not learned something, that you have not had an opportunity to serve society. And there's no greater feeling for a judge than to be able to serve those in need. If I ever hurt any one of you, I would like to just say Michhami Dukadam. Please forgive me for something which I didn't intend to ever say or do.
Well, to take this discussion ahead, I'm now joined by Anuradha Dutt, Managing Partner, DMD Advocates, Alok Prasanna, Co-founder, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, and Sherbir Panag, Founder and Managing Partner at Panag and Babu. Thank you so much for joining us, being a part of this discussion. Ms. Dutt, let me come to you. You have the unique distinction of being one of the few lawyers who've argued before him in the Bombay High Court when he used to sit in court number 40, also having argued before him in the top court in his capacity as the Chief Justice of India. I remember reporting out of the Bombay High Court in his very early days. There was already conversation in hushed tones in the corridors of the Bombay High Court with people saying that this man is sure to make it to the highest office of the Indian judiciary. Now, when you look back, now when he comes to an end of his judicial career, do you think he's fulfilled that promise? Or do you think he's left something on the table that he could have perhaps done more? And bear in mind that expectations were exceedingly high, higher than most other judges.
So I would say to you that there are two sides to him when he was Chief Justice. One is the judicial side and one is the administrative side. Now, as far as the administrative side is concerned, I think he's done tremendously well. And not only making things more accessible in the registry, etc., making matters to be listed far more easy than before. But I think his greatest contribution has been making VC compulsory, where after 22 judges started to put it off, and he forced every court to go in for VC, because I think younger lawyers, particularly women lawyers who marry, have young children, they're not able to come to court because of the children at home. I've seen over the last 2 years, a lot of young women lawyers who were not seen before,
Sure,
arguing, not just appearing, but arguing in court. So I think that in the administrative side is his greatest contribution. As far as judicial side is concerned, I think he's one of the most, intellectually one of the best judges we've had in Supreme Court recently. He's done a lot for women rights. The Hadiya right to marry, then lifting the ban on Sabri Malai, then making women commission officers, uh, decriminalizing 377, adultery, electoral bond case. These are milestones. Right to privacy definitely are milestones. The problem that I see why he's suddenly coming under some attack is because his tendency to speak outside court uh, is very high. Because he's an intellectual, he tends to give a lot of speeches outside court. And sometimes that doesn't match what he's doing in some judgments. I think that's the only problem. Like the Mandir case saying, I spoke to God now. You can't be as a judge saying, I speak to God and give judgment and not the law. So these are, controversies which he's creating, not necessary. But I do feel that he definitely has made a mark, both on judicial side, administrative side. Yes, every judge can do more, but there's only so much in 2 years that you can do,
Sure. Fair point. An excellent administrator, judge, the debate is still out on that. We'll, of course, get the opinion of some of the other panelists as well. Mr. Prasanna, let me come to you. A few days ahead of his retirement, you've written an interesting piece where you've, again, sought to dissect the judicial side, his functioning on the judicial side. You've critiqued a few judgments that he's come out with. Just taking cue from what Ms. Dutt had pointed out, that he was seen outside the courtroom equally as often as he was seen inside, that there are some judgments which in very important critical matters went in favor of the government, but yet were very smartly crafted in a traditional Justice Chandrachud style. These were some of the thoughts that came out of your piece. Tell us more. How would you review his performance on the judicial side?
Thanks, Ashmit. I agree with Ms. Anuradha that he's possibly one of the most intellectually well-equipped, and at least in terms of the judgments that he's written, judges that we have, which all the more makes it difficult to assess the legacy of judgments that he's leaving behind, which is why I used I put all his judgments, his major judgments, into 3 categories. One category, which I think Ms. Anuradha has already mentioned, and I won't repeat, are where the reasoning and the rhetoric and the outcome match. That here you have somebody who has a very carefully reasoned, very well thought out, philosophically well articulated judgment, which has an outcome which naturally flows from that. I think Ms. Dutt gave a great example in the privacy case. You could also add the women commissioned officers case, the Sabarimala case, and so on. But there's the second category of judgments, which I believe, where the rhetoric in the judgment itself, more than what he has said outside courts, does not actually lead to the kind of outcomes that you would expect that that kind of rhetoric would have. Here I'm talking about cases like the abortion case. I'm talking about the marriage equality case, where there is a lot of, very sound thinking, reasoning, and let's face it, very nice sounding liberal logic used. But the eventual outcome in those cases is nothing. Abortion is still criminalized in India, except in very limited circumstances. And that is why you have a lot of women who are running to the high courts to say, please allow us to abort in these circumstances, because the doctors are too terrified to carry out abortions.
Sure.
So you do have these second category of judgments where the reasoning seems sound, but the impact is almost nothing, because the relief eventually, which was nothing granted to the parties. There's a third, and this is the hugely controversial element of his legacy, where you have the rhetoric saying one thing, but the outcome of the judgment is diametrically the opposite. And in this category, I would put the Ayodhya judgment. I would put the Article 370 judgment. And I would put even the Loya judgment in this category, where on the one hand, you are saying, I believe in all these principles, but the eventual verdict is in diametrically the opposite direction. Just to take the Article 370 judgment, there are pages and pages and pages about federalism, how important it is, history of Jammu and Kashmir, and so on and so forth. When it comes to actually deciding, is it okay for the union government to put an end to the statehood of a state, the judgment stops dead. Right? There's no reasoning given. There is no final conclusion. Everything stops by saying, okay, the government has said at some point they might give Jammu and Kashmir a statehood back, so I guess it's okay. with the Ayodhya judgment, and I've written about this. Well, there is a lot of careful reasoning. Right at the end, you see that the claims made by the Hindus are weighed very differently from the way in which the claims made by the Muslims
commentary
are.
not in,
even though on the
so
face of
essentially
it,
the criticism is, so the criticism appears to be that the commentary perhaps not consistent with the final outcome.
Exactly.
I'm afraid I have to also get in Mr. Panag on this.
Sure.
Mr. Panag, your quick thoughts. The issue that appears to have been is that there was already a mindset as to what to expect of Justice Chandrachud, courtesy his public appearances. There were quite a lot of them. There was a public perception that was created. You think that perhaps led to exceedingly high expectations, which now, in comparison to the work that he's done, appears to give a sense of a disparity, appears to perhaps point at the direction of perhaps Mr. Justice Chandrachud left something on the table. He could have done more?
I think in terms of our expectations from judges and the judiciary, we've always generally been temperate, and we ought not to be. They are fundamental custodians of our constitutional values, and we must hold them to high standards. I do believe there was both a period of limited political competition, on account of which there was a higher expectation of the Chief Justice of India at this point of time, especially when it came to matters of liberty, and given some of the track record of some of our law enforcement bodies impacting both common citizens, certain cases that were allegedly politically motivated, and also businesses for that matter. And there was a need for a serious rethink on liberty. And while I'll completely endorse what Ms. Dutt said and what Mr. Prasanna said in terms of that Justice Chandrachud is one of the tallest intellectuals we've had, both as a jurist, as a lawyer, and as a judge. On the administrative side, also, I would agree that I think he's left behind a significant legacy that will hold the test of time. Save and except one administrative matter that I am going to pick bones with, which is what his conduct as the master of the roster. And sometime back, when we had judges do a press conference, we spoke, there was significant commentary about that. But today we have judges being sources to news reports. Even on several occasions, judicial propriety has been called into question. For example, very recently we had a landmark judgment which has probably pushed personal property rights the furthest in the last few years. But then you have a propriety question about certain paragraphs not finding their way in, remarks about a former judge of the court, and a challenge therein. So I do believe that these elements are also need to be considered when we look at his administrative legacy. But what I'm going to conclude with, and to come back to the point of expectations, there was a fundamental expectation that habeas corpus, that matters of liberty, would, when they fall before the highest court of the land, be treated fairly, be treated expeditiously, and a manner that was consistent with our law. Justice Chandrachud's defining legacy is going to be that statements made to universities, in lectures, made to the press, in interviews where he would not be cross-questioned, versus his own track record on liberty in the court, are entirely divergent to each other, both on the judicial side and on the master of the roster side.
Right, Mr. Panag, it's an interesting conversation, and this debate will continue on the other side of this short break on the legacy that Justice Chandrachud, India's 50th Chief Justice, has left behind. Welcome back. We're in conversation with a panel of experts. We're discussing and decoding the legacy that India's 50th Chief Justice, Justice Chandrachud, leaves behind. I'm joined on this panel by Ms. Anuradha Dutt. She's the managing partner at Dutt. We also have with us Mr. Alok Prasanna. He's the co-founder of Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, as well as Mr. Sherbir Panag. He's the founder as well as the managing partner at Panag and Babu. Thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Dutt, let me come to you. One question that you had raised was, of course, some of his appearances outside of court. The one question I want to bring to you is an aspect that made headlines, is when the Prime Minister visited the residence of CJI on Ganesh Chaturthi. It raised very many questions on judicial independence. It raised questions even on his conduct on the judicial side with respect to decisions that were made in Ayodhya in Article 370. What is your reading of those series of events? Is that something that perhaps could have been avoided, should have been avoided, or is that above board? Is that par for course, as Justice Chandrachud said, that it's not uncommon for elected leaders to come visit the Chief Justice?
Well, it's not uncommon now. But I would say, the point is not only what appears, but what is the perception that is being projected. Now, if the Prime Minister is going to go to the Chief Justice's house, otherwise there's no issue if there was some meeting. But for a prayer meeting where there are only two of them, the perception that is being sent out is that there's more than ordinary proximity. And I think that is not good for the perception of justice. Justice not only should be done, but also must be seen to be done. On the judgments, yes, I do agree that some of them are very political. 370, I totally agree with the panelist that, you can't say, oh, government will make Kashmir a state. If you are dealing with it, you should have gone the whole hog and said, okay, make it a state by this time. Now, he took the statement of the Solicitor General by September, October. We are not seeing anything. So, as I said to you, yes, the problem is that outside court, there were just too many statements being made, which raised the expectation very high. But when you deliver judgments, you are not that free as to whatever you feel like. You go as per what the law is, what the other judges bring together to the table. So I think that's where the mismatch and what he's done recently about Ayodhya, that really has left a bad taste in our mouth. Because to say that I write judgments to talking to God and not law is really contrary to the Constitution of India and the oath that he has taken, where he says he will abide by the Constitution of India, not by some God that he perceives. That, I think, is a breakdown, total breakdown.
Mr. Prasanna, same question to you. Some of the commentary being made outside, is that something that perhaps will reflect on his legacy, or is this unfair criticism where he's not being judged on the work that he's done in the courts, but rather some statements that he's made as a private citizen outside?
It will be both, Ashmit, because in a sense, you embody the office of the Chief Justice of India, and your office doesn't start and finish the moment you walk into court. Your conduct is scrutinized, and this is true for every judge. I'm just saying it's more so for the Chief Justice of India. Your conduct is scrutinized every second of every day, and it's a new reality. To be very honest, when I started practice back in 2009, we were in the last days of how the media used to treat judges and how the public also used to treat judges as these almost divine figures, and everything that was said in court and so on were these pearls of wisdom that the rest of us had to take. We are in a new reality in 2024. Every word a judge says, everything that they do is going to be scrutinized. And to me, the problem is not that the Prime Minister visited the Chief Justice. The problem is that there were cameras everywhere. This was publicized. And there was a message that was going out when it was being publicized. That is the story to me. To me, it seems to suggest that there was a message that was trying to be sent, which may have landed in the wrong way. But that is what has caused what has caused the problem. That you're talking about showing how close or proximate you are. It could be the Prime Minister showing it to the CJI, the CJI showing how close they're to the Prime Minister. That's a problem. And again, the judiciary is an institution whose credibility rests entirely on perception. Entirely.
Right.
And
so leaving
you
a
cannot
bad
say,
taste
oh,
in
it's just
the
a
mouth
perception
there.
problem, because that's all there is. Yeah, exactly. Right. So in that sense, I think
leaving a bad
this
taste in the
something
mouth
which was,
is
as
the
Mr.
sense
Anuradha Dutt has already said.
Sure.
Yes.
So that's the sense coming in from our panelists. We're running out of time, Mr. Panag. I'll come to you for a few final thoughts. All the aspects that we've discussed, some of the work that he's done on the administrative side, what he's done with virtual hearings, some of his own self-discipline. In a very recent conversation I had with him, he told us how he wakes up at 4:30, how he's a vegan, he does yoga. The only vice appears to be, at least on his personal side, that he has a samosa. I think that appears to be the only vice. Having done that, having clocked 612 judgments, over 1,200 benches, what lessons is he leaving behind for Justice Khanna, who's set to take over as the next 51st CJI come November 11th?
Ashmit, the only lesson he's leaving behind is that constitutional courts must be judged by constitutional values. And everything else, from vices to the number of judgments that get written, are irrelevant if constitutional values are not upheld and judicial propriety is not upheld. On each of the examples we've gone through, I don't think there's any brownie points that could be granted if a constitutional court fails on first principles, and that first principle boils down to liberty and judicial propriety. To me, that is the highest yardstick. The challenge when senior judges and the Chief Justice of India has one version of liberty and constitutional values for public consumption outside the court, and that does not meet the muster of judgments, there is a breakdown, and then the rank and file reads into that breakdown, and that rank and file goes down to the absolute bottom of our justice dispensation, just the dispensation system. So I think the legacy to guide future judges is going to be to stay true to constitutional values and stay true to judicial propriety. The next time a political leader or a member of the executive wishes to call upon the Chief Justice, even in a so-called private event with cameras, then judicial propriety would demand the leader of opposition, the president, vice president, speaker of the House to be present. And if that muster cannot be met, then the lesson has not been imparted.
Right. So an interesting, prolific journey of Justice Chandrachud coming to an equally interesting end, leaving a divided house in terms of what the legacy may actually look like. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for taking out their time, sharing their insight for the benefit of our viewers. Ms. Dutt, Mr. Prasanna, Mr. Panag, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective for our viewers. So there you have it. The journey of Justice Chandrachud comes to an end. Well, not technically today. It comes to an end on November 10th. But that's on Sunday, given the fact that today is the last working day is when Justice Chandrachud draws curtains on his role as the CJI, as the 50th CJI at the Apex Court. Again, raising a lot of questions as to what his journey over the last 8 years in the top court will look like in the public eye, in the public perception. But that's unfortunately all the time that we have. For more news and updates, keep watching CNBC TV 18.